The deep space exploration vessel UES Meridian drifted silently through the void between star systems. Its hull gleamed under the distant light of a red dwarf star as it continued its mission to map the outer reaches of human space. Inside the ship, the crew went about their daily routines with the calm efficiency of people who had spent months together in the endless darkness. Communications. Officer Lisa Martinez sat at her station on the bridge, monitoring the usual background chatter of space. Most days brought nothing but static, solar wind interference, and the occasional automated beacon from mining stations. She had learned to tune out the constant hum of cosmic radiation and focus on the patterns that might indicate something more interesting. Today felt different. At first, it was just a whisper in the noise. A signal that seemed too organized to be natural but too faint to be clearly artificial. Lisa adjusted her equipment and filtered out the background static. The signal grew stronger, more defined. Her heart began to race as she realized what she was hearing. "Captain Morrison," she called out, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm picking up something unusual on the long-range sensors." Captain Jake Morrison looked up from his morning reports. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's beauty to ever grow tired of exploration. "What kind of unusual, Lisa?" "It looks like a transmission, sir, not from any human source I can identify. The signal pattern is completely foreign." Morrison set down his tablet and walked over to Lisa's station. The bridge fell quiet as other crew members turned their attention to the conversation. First contact with alien intelligence had always been a possibility, but after years of finding nothing but empty space and dead worlds, most of the crew had stopped expecting it. "Can you clean it up?" Morrison asked. Lisa's fingers danced across her controls. "I'm trying, sir. The signal is very weak, and it's coming from a long way off. But there's definitely a pattern here. This isn't random noise." Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's linguist and communications specialist, hurried onto the bridge. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that could decode patterns faster than the ship's computers. "Lisa sent me an alert. What do we have?" "Listen to this," Lisa said, routing the cleaned-up signal through the bridge speakers. The sound that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was musical in a way, with rising and falling tones that seemed to carry meaning, even though none of them could understand it. The pattern repeated several times, with slight variations each time. Amy's eyes widened. "That's definitely language. The repetition pattern suggests it might be some kind of distress call or automated message." "How can you tell?" Morrison asked. "The way it repeats with variations. Most automated signals repeat exactly the same way every time. This has the kind of small changes you'd expect from a living being trying to communicate. Like someone saying, 'Help me,' over and over, but with slightly different emphasis each time." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Somewhere out there, an alien being might be calling for help? How long would it take to decode? Amy considered the question. If it's a distress call, they might be using mathematical concepts or basic physics to establish meaning. "Give me a few hours with the computer and I might be able to get something." "Do it," Morrison said immediately. "Lisa, can you get a fix on where this is coming from?" "Already working on it, sir. The signal is coming from a system about 12 light-years away. It's not on any of our star charts, but the computer shows it has at least one planet in the habitable zone." Morrison nodded. "I want everyone to keep this quiet until we know more. If this is really first contact, we need to handle it properly." He turned to his second-in-command. "Get me Paul Chun and Kate Brooks. If we're going to investigate this, I want our best people ready." Over the next few hours, the Meridian's crew worked with quiet intensity. Amy Foster locked herself in the computer lab with the alien signal, running it through every linguistic analysis program they had. Paul Chen, the ship's chief engineer, began calculating jump coordinates and checking the ship's long-range capabilities. Dr. Kate Brooks, their medical officer, started preparing emergency supplies in case they encountered injured aliens. The breakthrough came 6 hours later. Amy burst onto the bridge, her face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. "Captain, I've got something." It's not complete, but I think I understand the basic message. Morrison gathered his senior staff around Amy's workstation. The alien signal played softly in the background as she explained her findings. The mathematical concepts match up with what we'd expect from a species that understands physics, Amy began. They're using prime numbers and basic geometric relationships to establish meaning. But Captain, this isn't just a distress call. It's much more specific. She pulled up her translation on the main screen. The words were rough and incomplete, but the meaning was clear enough to make everyone's blood run cold. They're calling themselves the Kalrani, Amy continued, and they're asking for help. According to this message, they're under attack by something called the Vorthak. The Kalrani say the Vorthak are destroying their colonies and enslaving their people. They're begging for help from any species that might hear them. Morrison read the translation again. The desperation in the message was clear even through the rough translation. How reliable is this translation? About 70% accurate for the basic meaning, Amy replied. The emotional content is definitely there. These people are terrified. Paul Chun looked up from his calculations. Captain, we could reach their system in about 18 hours if we push the jump drive. The Meridian isn't a warship, but we have enough firepower to handle most threats, Dr. Brooks nodded. I've prepared medical supplies for multiple species. We don't know their biology, but I can adapt our equipment for most scenarios. Morrison looked around at his crew. These were good people, the kind who had volunteered for deep space exploration because they wanted to make the galaxy a better place. The idea of ignoring a call for help was unthinkable to any of them. There's something else, Amy said quietly. The signal is getting weaker. Either they're running out of power or ... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Morrison made his decision. Set course for the Kalrani system, full speed. As the Meridian's jump drive powered up, Lisa Martinez continued monitoring the alien signal. It was getting fainter, but she could still make out the repeated pattern of the distress call. Somewhere out there, an alien civilization was fighting for its survival. None of them knew that the signal they had intercepted was never meant for their ears. The Kalrani had been using false distress calls for centuries, luring peaceful species into carefully planned traps. The Vorthak were actually the defenders of worlds. The Kalrani had invaded. The crew of the Meridian was flying straight into an ambush, their natural human desire to help others making them perfect victims for the Kalrani's deception. But the Kalrani had made one critical error in their planning. They had never encountered a species from a Deathworld before. They had no idea what humans were capable of when their friends were threatened. In 18 hours, the galaxy would learn that there were some species you should never try to trick, and some fights you should never pick. The Meridian jumped to hyperspace, carrying its unsuspecting crew toward their destiny and the beginning of a legend that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The UES Meridian dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that sent coffee cups sliding across tables throughout the ship. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the stars wheeled into view on the main screen. What they saw made everyone on the bridge freeze in shock. Space around them was filled with ships locked in desperate combat. Massive alien vessels, sleek and silver, were being chased by larger, more brutal-looking warships. Explosions lit up the darkness as weapons fire streaked between the fleets. The scene looked like exactly what the distress signal had described. "My God," whispered Dr. Amy Foster, staring at the battle raging before them. "We're too late. The Vorthak are already attacking. The smaller silver ships were clearly losing. Several were already burning hulks drifting through space, their crews either dead or dying. The larger ships pressed their attack with ruthless efficiency, their weapons tearing through the defenders with ease. "Lisa, are you picking up any communications?" Morrison asked. Communications officer Lisa Martinez worked frantically at her station. "Yes, sir, multiple signals. The smaller ships are definitely Kalrani. They're screaming for help. The bigger ships, I can't understand their language, but they sound angry." Morrison didn't hesitate. "Paul, get us closer to the Kalrani ships. We need to provide cover while they retreat. Engineer Paul Chun's hands flew over his controls. Moving to intercept, Captain. But sir, those big ships have a lot more firepower than we do. We have to try, Morrison said firmly. We can't just watch them get slaughtered. The Meridian moved toward the battle, its small human crew preparing to face unknown aliens in defense of a species they had never met. It was exactly the kind of heroic gesture that made humans special among the stars. It was also exactly what the Kelrani had been counting on. As soon as the Meridian entered weapons range, everything changed. The fleeing Kelrani ships suddenly turned in perfect coordination, their weapons powering up and targeting the human vessel. The larger ships that had been chasing them also turned, but instead of continuing to attack the Kelrani, they simply stopped moving. Captain, Lisa Martinez shouted in alarm. The Kelrani ships are targeting us. Morrison stared at the screen in confusion. That can't be right. We're here to help them. Sir, I'm reading weapon locks from at least 12 Kelrani vessels, reported Tactical Officer Lisa Rodriguez. They're not running from us. They're surrounding us. Dr. Amy Foster was checking her translation equipment frantically. Wait, I'm picking up a new signal. It's coming from the lead Kelrani ship. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a new voice. This one spoke in broken but understandable English, the words cold and mocking. Greetings, unknown species. I am War Prime Kethrin of the Kelrani Empire. You have responded to our signal as expected. Your vessel will now surrender immediately. Morrison felt his blood turn to ice. Signal? You mean the distress call? Kethrin's laugh was like breaking glass. There is no distress. There never was. We broadcast these signals to lure weak, foolish species like yours into our territory. You came here to help us, and now you will serve us. The truth hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Amy Foster's face went white as she realized the full scope of the deception. The translation. I was wrong. They weren't asking for help. They were hunting, Morrison finished grimly on the main screen. The larger ships that had been attacking the Kelrani suddenly shut down. Completely. Pol Chin ran a quick scan and reported what everyone was beginning to suspect. Captain, those big ships are empty. They're just hulks being pushed around by tractor beams. The whole battle was fake. War Prime Kethrin's voice filled the bridge again. You have 30 minutes to prepare for boarding. We will take your ship, study your technology, and add your species to our collection of servants. Do not attempt to flee. Do not attempt to fight. You are surrounded and outgunned. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people, explorers and scientists who had volunteered for this mission because they wanted to make the galaxy a better place. Now they were trapped by their own desire to help others. How many ships are we facing? He asked quietly, Lisa. Rodriguez checked her tactical display. 15 Kelrani vessels, sir. Each one is bigger than us and better armed. Any chance of escape? Paul Chung shook his head. They've got us boxed in. Even if we could break through their formation, they're faster than we are. Morrison nodded slowly. He had expected this mission to be dangerous, but he had never imagined they would face something like this. The Kelrani had turned humanity's greatest strength into a weakness, using their compassion against them. Captain, Amy Foster said in a small voice, I'm receiving more transmissions. The Kelrani are talking to each other about other species they've captured this way, dozens of them. They'd been doing this for centuries. The bridge fell silent as the full horror of the situation sank in. This wasn't just about the Meridian. The Kelrani had been using this trick to enslave entire civilizations, turning the galaxy's good-hearted species into victims. Morrison felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since his days as a young officer during the resource wars on Earth. Back then, he had learned that sometimes the only way to protect innocent people was to become something terrible yourself. Sir, Lisa Rodriguez said, the Kelrani are demanding a response. They want to know if we're going to surrender. Morrison looked at his crew again. These people had families back on Earth. They had dreams and hopes and plans for the future. The Kelrani wanted to take all of that away from them. Amy, he said quietly, what else are the Kalrani saying to each other? Amy listened to her equipment for a moment. They're discussing which of our crew members would make the best slaves. They're planning to sell some of us and keep others for their own use. They think we're weak because we came to help. Morrison felt the last of his peaceful intentions die. The Kalrani had made a mistake. They had studied humanity enough to know that humans would respond to a distress call, but they had never bothered to learn what humans were capable of when their friends were threatened. Paul, Morrison said, his voice taking on a tone his crew had never heard before. What's our combat readiness? Paul Chun blinked in surprise. Sir, we're not a warship. We have basic defensive systems and some mining equipment, but nothing that could take on a fleet. That's not what I asked, Morrison replied. I asked about our combat readiness. Something in the captain's tone made Paul reconsider his answer. Well, sir, if we reroute power from non-essential systems, we could boost our shields and weapons, and the mining lasers could be recalibrated for combat use. But, Captain, we're still talking about 15 enemy ships. Morrison stood up slowly. Lisa, open a channel to the Kalrani fleet. Sir? Lisa Martinez looked confused. Do it. The channel opened and War Prime Catherine's mocking voice filled the bridge. Have you decided to surrender, little mammals? Morrison. Look directly at the main screen. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Meridian. You ask what kind of species we are. We're the kind that spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other and then learned how to work together instead. We're the kind that survived on a world where everything was trying to kill us. And you just made the biggest mistake of your lives. There was a moment of silence. Then Catherine laughed. Big words from a small ship. You have 20 minutes left. Morrison. Cut the channel and turn to his crew. We're not surrendering. We're not running. We're going to show these predators what happens when they threaten Earth's children. The crew of the Meridian stared at their captain in shock. They had never seen this side of him before. But as they looked into his eyes, they saw something that made them stand a little straighter. They saw the reason why humans had conquered their Deathworld and reached for the stars. The change that swept through the UES Meridian was unlike anything the Kalrani had ever witnessed. Within minutes, the peaceful exploration vessel transformed into something that made War Prime Catherine's confident smile fade from his alien features. Chief. Security Officer Dan Walsh arrived on the bridge carrying a bag of equipment that most people forgot the ship even had. His face was grim as he began distributing weapons to the crew. Combat protocols are now in effect, he announced. Everyone knows their emergency stations. We've drilled for this. Dr. Amy Foster looked at the weapon Dan handed her with surprise. I thought these were just for emergencies on hostile planets. This is a hostile planet, Don replied. It just happens to be made of vacuum and metal instead of rock and trees. Captain Morrison watched his crew transform before his eyes. These were the same people who had been excited about making peaceful contact with aliens just hours ago. Now they moved with the deadly efficiency of predators preparing for a hunt. Engineer Paul Chun was already deep in the ship's systems, rerouting power and making modifications that would have been impossible if the ship's designers hadn't been human. Captain, I'm redirecting power from life support to weapons and shields. We can maintain breathable atmosphere for about 6 hours on backup systems. The mining lasers? Morrison asked. Already working on it. Give me 10 minutes and I'll have them recalibrated for combat use. They won't be as precise as real weapons, but they'll cut through ship hulls just fine. Dr. Kate Brooks was converting the medical bay into a combat treatment center. She had already synthesized combat drugs from the medical supplies and was preparing the surgical equipment for battlefield injuries. If anyone gets hurt, bring them to me. I'll keep you fighting. The Kalrani watched all this activity through their surveillance equipment with growing confusion. They had expected panic, fear, and desperate attempts to negotiate. Instead, they saw a crew that seemed to know exactly what to do in a combat situation. War Prime, one of Catherine's subordinates, reported, the humans are not behaving as expected. They appear to be preparing for battle rather than surrender. Catherine snarled. Impossible. They are a weak species that responded to our distress signal. They cannot pose a threat to our fleet. But even as he spoke, the Kalrani sensors were picking up energy readings from the human ship that made no sense. The vessel was somehow generating more power than its size should have allowed. On the Meridian's bridge, Tactical Officer Lisa Rodriguez was running combat simulations with the ship's computer. Captain, I'm analyzing their formation. They're arranged for intimidation, not actual combat. They're expecting us to surrender. What's their weakness? Morrison asked. They're clustered too close together. If we can get into the middle of their formation, they'll have trouble targeting us without hitting each other. Morrison nodded. Paul, how's our mobility? Better than they think, Paul called back from his station. I've been studying their engine emissions. They're faster than us in a straight line, but our maneuvering systems are more advanced. We can change direction quicker than they can. Communications Officer Lisa Martinez was listening to the Kalrani communications with growing amazement. Captain, they're talking about us like we're animals. They keep referring to us as prey species and discussing how to divide up our crew. Morrison felt that cold anger settle deeper in his chest. Amy, what have you learned about their tactics? Dr. Amy Foster had been analyzing the Kalrani language patterns and tactical communications. They're used to fighting species that rely on technology over strategy. Their formations are rigid, their communications are predictable, and they seem to have no concept of improvisation. They've never fought anyone who fights back, Morrison realized. Exactly. Every species they've encountered has either surrendered immediately or been too peaceful to mount an effective resistance. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. They were ready. More than ready, they were angry. Dan, what's our combat doctrine? He asked. Chief Security Officer Dan Walsh smiled grimly. Hit hard, hit fast, and never let them predict what we'll do next. Classic Earth military thinking? The Kalrani had given them 30 minutes to surrender. They had used 28 of those minutes to prepare for war. All stations, report readiness, Morrison commanded. Weapons systems modified and ready, Paul Chun reported. Medical bay prepared for casualties, Dr. Kate Brooks called out. Tactical analysis complete, Lisa Rodriguez announced. Communications monitored and ready, Lisa Martinez added. Security teams armed and positioned, Don Walsh confirmed. Linguistic analysis ongoing, Amy Foster said. Morrison stood up from his command chair. War Prime Catherine, this is Captain Morrison. Your 30 minutes are up. The alien's voice came through the speakers with smug satisfaction. Excellent, prepare to be boarded. Resistance will only make your slavery more unpleasant. You misunderstand, Morrison replied calmly. We're not surrendering. We're giving you one chance to leave this system and never return. The silence from the Kalrani fleet lasted for several seconds. Then Catherine began laughing. You think one small ship can threaten our entire fleet? You are even more foolish than most prey species. We're not prey, Morrison said quietly. We're the species that ate everything that tried to eat us. He cut the communication and turned to his crew. Execute Combat Protocol Alpha. Show them what a Deathworld species looks like when it's angry. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. The Meridian's engines roared to life, pushing the ship directly toward the center of the Kalrani formation at maximum speed. The aliens, expecting the humans to try to flee, were caught completely off guard. Paul Chun's modified mining lasers opened fire, cutting through the hull of the nearest Kalrani ship like it was made of paper. The precision of the attack was surgical, disabling the vessel's weapons without destroying it completely. Target their engines and weapons, Morrison ordered. We want prisoners to interrogate. The Kalrani tried to respond, but their rigid formation worked against them. As the Meridian wove between their ships, they found themselves unable to fire without risking hitting their own allies. Lisa Rodriguez coordinated the tactical display with deadly efficiency. Next target, bearing 27 Mark IV. They're trying to get a weapons lock. The Meridian rolled and dove, its smaller size allowing it to maneuver in ways the larger Kalrani ships couldn't match. Pol Chun's weapons found their target, disabling another enemy vessel. War Prime! One of the Kalrani commanders screamed over their communications. The humans are not fighting like prey. They are fighting like predators. Kethrin watched his carefully planned ambush fall apart as the single human ship systematically dismantled his fleet. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were hunting. Impossible, he snarled. They are a peaceful species. They came to help us. They came to help the people they thought we were, Amy Foster said, having patched into the Kalrani. Communications? But we're not those people, are we? We're the monsters who prey on the innocent. The Kalrani began to understand their mistake. They had trapped a species that had spent millennia learning to kill, thinking they were capturing helpless prey. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping peacefully among the stars. All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel, Kethrin commanded, but it was too late. The Meridian was already among them, turning their own formation into a cage that trapped the Kalrani instead of their intended victims. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of battle. This is what happens when you threaten our friends. This is what happens when you try to enslave innocent people. This is what happens when you wake up Earth. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had conquered their Deathworld and reached for the stars. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Kalrani had ever experienced. Within an hour, half of their fleet was disabled, drifting helplessly in space with their weapons destroyed and their engines dead. The single human ship moved through them like a shark among fish, striking with precision and purpose. War Prime Kethrin found himself trapped in his command ship, watching his carefully planned ambush turn into a nightmare. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were methodically hunting down every Kalrani vessel, disabling them one by one. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical officer. They fight like nothing we have ever seen, the officer replied, his voice shaking. They predict our movements, they turn our own formations against us, and they adapt to our tactics faster than we can change them. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Meridian, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. His crew had transformed from peaceful explorers into something that terrified their enemies. But this was just the beginning. Lisa Patch. Me into the Kalrani command frequency, he ordered. Communications Officer Lisa Martinez worked quickly. You're connected, Captain, Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of the battle. War Prime Kethrin, this is Captain Morrison. I want to talk. You want to negotiate surrender? Kethrin asked hopefully. No, Morrison replied. I want information. How many other species have you done this to? There was silence from the Kalrani commander. Morrison nodded to Lisa Rodriguez, who targeted the War Prime's ship with a precision. Laser strike. The beam cut through the Kalrani vessel's outer hull, stopping just short of critical systems. The next shot goes through your bridge, Morrison said calmly. How many species? Hundreds, Kethrin admitted, his voice filled with fear. Over 3 centuries, we have captured hundreds of species using this method. Morrison felt his cruise. Anger like a physical force. Dr. Amy Foster was translating the Kalrani communications in real time, and what she was hearing made her face go pale. Captain, she said quietly, they're talking about slave camps, entire civilizations that have been enslaved. They sell people like cattle, Engineer Paul Chun looked up from his station. Captain, I'm detecting jump signatures. More Kalrani ships are coming. Morrison checked the tactical display. How many? At least 20 more vessels, sir. Bigger than the ones we just fought. Morrison made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. We're not running. We're going to end this. Chief Security Officer Dan Walsh looked up in surprise. Sir, we can't fight that many ships. We're not going to fight them, Morrison said. We're going to turn them against each other. Dr. Amy Foster had been listening to the Kalrani communications with growing understanding. Captain, I think I know how. They're not a unified fleet. They're different factions of the same empire, and they don't trust each other. Explain. The ships that are coming belong to War Prime Kethrin's rival, a leader called Thekvar. They're not coming to help. They're coming to steal the prize for themselves. Morrison smiled grimly. Then let's give them something to fight over. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in human tactical thinking. Morrison had his crew hack into the Kalrani communication systems, using their own network against them. They sent false messages between the fleets, making each group believe the other was planning to betray them. When Thekvar's ships arrived, they found Kethrin's fleet crippled and the human vessel apparently helpless. But instead of working together, the two Kalrani factions immediately began fighting each other for the right to claim the prize. "This is perfect," Lisa Rodriguez said, watching the alien ships tear each other apart. "They're doing our work for us." But Morrison wasn't satisfied with just watching. "Paul, can you get us close to that disabled Kalrani ship?" "The big one? Yes, sir, but why?" "Because we need to get aboard and find out where their slave camps are located." The crew stared at their captain in shock. Dr. Kate Brooks was the first to speak. "Sir, you want to board an enemy ship?" "I want to board an enemy ship, find their databases, and locate every single species they've enslaved. Then we're going to free them all," Don Walsh grinned. "Now you're talking my language, Captain." The boarding operation was swift and brutal. The Kalrani had never faced enemies who boarded their ships, and they were completely unprepared for human close-quarters combat tactics. Don Walsh led a team of security officers through the alien vessel, capturing prisoners and securing the ship's computer systems. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically to decode the Kalrani databases while the boarding team held the ship. What she found made her sick to her stomach. "Captain," she reported over the communication link, "they have detailed records of every species they've captured. Locations of slave camps, breeding programs, genetic modification experiments. It's worse than we thought." Morrison felt his anger burn even hotter. "How many?" "Over 400 different species. Some of them have been enslaved for centuries. And Captain, there's something else. They're not just slavers. They're also planning to attack Earth." The bridge of the Meridian fell silent. Morrison's voice was deadly calm when he spoke. "What do you mean?" "They have detailed intelligence about human space. They know about our colonies, our trade routes, our military capabilities. This ambush was just the beginning. They were planning to use what they learned from us to launch a full-scale invasion of human space." Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. These people had signed up to explore the stars and make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, they had discovered a galactic empire built on slavery and suffering that was planning to destroy everything they held dear. "Paul," Morrison said quietly, "how's our long-range communication system?" "Fully functional, sir. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them what we found. Tell them about the Kalrani threat and the locations of their slave camps. Tell them that humanity is no longer alone in the galaxy and that we have work to do." As the message was transmitted, Morrison watched the two Kalrani fleets continue to destroy each other in their greed and mistrust. The aliens had spent centuries preying on peaceful species, but they had never learned to work together. Their empire was built on fear and domination, not cooperation and trust. "Captain," Lisa Martinez reported, "I'm picking up communications from the disabled Kalrani ships. They're trying to call for help." Morrison's smile was cold. "Cut their communications. No one leaves this system until we're done with them." The crew of the Meridian began the systematic capture of every Kalrani vessel in the system. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for every species the Kalrani had enslaved, every civilization they had destroyed, and every innocent life they had taken. The boarding teams brought back horror stories from the Kalrani ships. Cargo holds full of alien slaves, genetic modification laboratories, and detailed plans for the invasion of dozens of star systems. The Kalrani Empire was a cancer that had been growing in the galaxy for centuries. "Amy," Morrison said, "start broadcasting the truth about the Kalrani to every inhabited system you can reach. Let the galaxy know what these monsters have been doing." As the truth spread through space, something began to change. The Kelrani had built their empire on the assumption that other species would always be weak and divided. But humanity had just proven that some species fought back, and when humans fought back, they didn't just defend themselves. They hunted down the predators and made sure they could never hurt anyone again. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth's children had come to the stars not as conquerors but as protectors, and they were very, very good at their job. 6 months after the battle in Kelrani space, the galaxy was a very different place. The UES Meridian sat in orbit around a world called Taros Prime, where representatives from dozens of liberated species had gathered for the first Galactic Defense Coalition meeting. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck, watching shuttles arrive from across known space. Each one carried delegates from civilizations that had been freed from Kelrani slavery. The sight filled him with a mixture of pride and sadness. Dr. Amy Foster joined him at the viewing port. "The Vorthek delegation just arrived," she said. "They want to thank you personally," Morrison shook his head. "They should be thanking all of us. This wasn't the work of one person." The Vorthak had turned out to be exactly what the Kelrani had pretended to be in their false distress calls. They were a noble species that had been fighting a losing war against Kelrani expansion for decades. When the humans had revealed the truth about the Kelrani Empire, the Vorthak had become their first and strongest allies. "The liberation of the Tethys system is complete," Amy continued. "That makes 47 star systems freed from Kelrani control. The last of their slave camps have been shut down." Morrison nodded. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of activity. The crew of the Meridian had become the core of a growing resistance movement that spread across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of Kelrani raids for centuries had finally found the courage to fight back. Engineer Pol Chun approached them with a tablet in his hands. "Captain, I've got the final report on the Kelrani fleet capabilities. We've captured or destroyed 93% of their vessels. The remaining ships have either fled to unknown space or surrendered. And their leadership? War Prime Catherine is in custody on Earth, along with most of their command structure. The War Crimes Tribunal starts next month." Morrison felt a grim satisfaction at that news. The Kelrani leaders would face justice for their crimes, but more importantly, they would never again be able to harm innocent species. Chief Security Officer Dan Walsh joined the group. "Captain, the delegates are ready for the opening ceremony." "They're asking for you." Morrison straightened his uniform. The past 6 months had changed him. He was no longer just an exploration captain. He had become something he had never expected. To be a symbol of hope for oppressed species across the galaxy, the main conference hall was filled with representatives from species that had never met before. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some were humanoid, others looked like nothing Morrison had ever imagined. But they all had one thing in common. They had all suffered under Kelrani oppression. As Morrison entered the hall, the diverse crowd fell silent. He had become a legend among these people, the human captain who had turned the hunters into the hunted. "Friends," Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices. "6 months ago, most of you had never heard of humanity. We were just another species exploring the stars, looking for friends among the cosmos." He paused, looking out at the gathered delegates. "We found friends. But we also found something else. We found a galaxy where the strong preyed on the weak, where kindness was seen as weakness, and where offering help could get you enslaved or killed." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "The Kelrani thought they understood us," Morrison continued. "They thought that because we responded to their false distress call, we were weak. They were wrong." Dr. Kate Brooks, now serving as the head of Galactic Medical Relief Efforts, spoke next. "Humanity learned long ago that the greatest strength comes not from dominating others, but from protecting them. We didn't come to the stars to conquer. We came to explore, to learn, and to help." Communications Officer Lisa Martinez, who had become the Coalition's head of information warfare, added, "The Kelrani Empire was built on lies and fear. We've replaced their propaganda with truth. Every species in the galaxy now knows about their tactics, and their crimes. The real surprise came when a Kalrani delegate approached the podium. This was Kalthera, one of the few Kalrani who had rejected their empire's ways and helped the coalition locate hidden slave camps. "The humans showed us something we had forgotten," Kalthera said, his translated words heavy with emotion. "They showed us that strength without honor is just cruelty. My people had become monsters, but the humans gave us a chance to become something better." Morrison watched as several liberated species approached Kalthara, offering gestures of friendship and forgiveness. It was exactly what he had hoped for, not just the destruction of evil, but its replacement with something good. Tactical Officer Lisa Rodriguez presented the final military report. The Galactic Defense Coalition now includes 87 species across 47 star systems. We have established patrol routes to prevent future slave raids and created rapid response teams for species under threat. Most importantly, she continued, we've shared human tactical knowledge with all member species. No civilization will ever again be defenseless against predators like the Kalrani. The conference continued for 3 days, but the real work was just beginning. The coalition needed to rebuild entire civilizations, care for millions of liberated slaves, and create a new system of galactic governance based on cooperation instead of domination. On the final day, Morrison found himself in a quiet moment with his original crew. They were no longer just the officers of a single exploration ship. They had become the leaders of a galactic alliance. "Do you ever regret answering that distress call?" Amy Foster asked. Morrison considered the question. "Every day," he said. "Honestly, but not for the reason you might think. I regret that it took us so long to find out what was happening out here." Pol Chen looked up from his engineering reports. "Earth Command wants to know when we're coming home." Morrison smiled. "This is home now. The galaxy is full of species that need protection, and we're the ones who know how to provide it." Don Walsh nodded. "The Kalrani taught us something important. They showed us that the galaxy needed guardians, not just explorers." Dr. Kate Brooks was treating a group of recently liberated alien children when she added, "We came looking for friends and found a family. A very large, very diverse family that needs our help." As the conference ended, delegations began departing for their homeworlds, but they weren't leaving empty-handed. Each carried copies of human tactical manuals, communication protocols, and most importantly, the knowledge that they were no longer alone. The UES Meridian prepared to depart as well. But not for Earth. There were reports of other predator species in distant parts of the galaxy, civilizations that might be following the Kalrani model of expansion and exploitation. "Where to next, Captain?" Lisa Martinez asked as they prepared for departure. Morrison looked at the star charts showing the vast, unexplored regions of space. "Wherever we're needed. The galaxy is a big place, and there are probably other species out there who think kindness is weakness." As the Meridian jumped to hyperspace, Morrison reflected on how much had changed. They had set out to explore the unknown and had ended up becoming the protectors of the innocent. The human crew had discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactical skills, but their unwillingness to stand by while others suffered. The wrong transmission had led them into a trap, but it had also led them to their true purpose among the stars. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or even as explorers, but as the guardians who made sure that the strong protected the weak instead of preying on them. Dom and across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for centuries slept peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, Earth's children were standing watch.